Okay, so here we're going to go through the process of solving a problem that's going to require us to have user input, calculations, formatted output, and I'm also going to demonstrate the use of a constant in here as well. So here's my program design document template, and you can see that I have the problem here. The user will enter the number of hours worked and their hourly pay rate, calculate and display their gross pay and their net pay, assuming a tax rate of 25%. So we want to think about, based on that problem, what variables we're going to need. So you can see here that, let's take that out for a second. I'm going to have a variable that's going to hold the number of hours worked, the pay rate, the gross pay, and the net pay. And I'm going to use a constant to declare my tax rate. So you can see that here, 0.25. And you can use whatever names you want, right? I'm trying to come up with meaningful names, and you have to decide on the variable names or the identifiers when you write a program. So, why not come up with those now that you can use in your program? If while you're writing your algorithm, you think about other things that you need, you could introduce other variables. You can come back and add those to the list. So here I'm just going to start with the first step, which is get information. And the information, and I think in our previous one, we had one more step here, which was initialize variables, but I don't think I have any variables I'm going to initialize, so I'm just going to leave that out right now. In the algorithm then, getting information is the first thing we're going to do. We're going to get two pieces of information from the user, the hours worked and the pay rate. Okay, sorry. And I'm just going to list that information here. Then we want to think about the calculations. Now, if you can think about the calculations and how to calculate this, that's fine. Or if you want to determine what your test data is going to be first to help you with the calculation, sometimes that might help people as well. But I'm going to calculate my gross pay first, which is just going to be the hours worked times the pay rate. And, this might look like, kind of C++-ish. It doesn't have to be correct syntax. It's just an algorithm. And then I have to think about my net pay. Well, my net pay is going to be my gross pay minus how much I pay in taxes. So you could do this all as one calculation, like net pay equals gross pay minus gross pay times 0.25. Or, some people might want to think about, I'm going to calculate the taxes first and then subtract them from my gross pay. So, that's kind of up to you. You could do this in 2 steps. You can do it in 3. Okay. And then to get my net pay, I'm just going to have my gross pay minus my taxes. Now, see, I didn't list taxes up here initially, but I could go back and add it after the fact once I've determined that I needed it. And again, there's other ways to do this calculation. As long as it's correct, you can do it whatever way you want. Okay. The last thing I want to do is display the gross pay and the net pay. And if you're wondering, like, what should I display? Well, it says to display the gross pay and the net pay, so that's what you should display. Nothing more, nothing less. I'm not going to worry about formatting things here. This is just an algorithm. All right, so my test data, I want to come up with some test data. So when I run my program, I know what to expect. So I'm just going to pick for my, I'm sorry, I got to pick my hours worked first. So for my hours worked, I'll just say 40. For my pay rate, I'll say 15. So if I know that's the case, then I know my gross pay is just going to be 40 times 15, which is 600. I can calculate my taxes, which will be my gross pay, which is 600 times 0.25. Right, so that's going to be 150. And then my net pay, will be my gross pay minus my taxes. Right, like that. I want to know that when my program runs, if it says my gross pay is 600 and it says my net pay is 450, that my program's running correctly. If I don't know what any test data looks like or what to expect, I'm not going to know if my program's running correctly. These are just numbers I picked. You could pick your own numbers if you want, and you can plug those in, but this is the test data I'm using. Notice in my calculations, there's no numbers. This is just, kind of data that I'm determining, so I know when my program runs that if I put 40 and 15 in, I should get 600 as a gross pay, 450 as a net pay. So you don't want to have any of those numbers up here, just your variables. Okay, now we're going to take this into an actual program. Okay, so here's my main program, and here you can see are my variables and my constant, and those are coming right from that design document, right? The next step is I want to get my information from the user. Oops. So here's my interactive input statements, right? I see out, enter the number of hours worked, read in the number of hours worked, enter the hourly pay rate, and read in the hourly pay rate. Okay, that's going to be my first step. My next step, right, are going to be my calculations. Right, here's my calculations, right? I have my assignment statements, my variable on the left. I assign it, here, hours times pay rate. You have to have a semicolon at the end, right? That's all C++ rules. And then the last part of my algorithm is to display the results. Okay. Now, I put a $sign here as part of my string because, it might look better to have a $sign in front of dollar values. I do want both of my values to display with 2 places after the decimal point, so I need to use fixed and set precision. I'm going to do that first. It's going to apply to both of these. And then when I run my program, if I put in my test data, 40 and 15, it says the gross pay is 600 and the net pay is 450. So that's actually my output there. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. Right? My output matches my test data. If you don't know how to come up with the test data, you're probably not going to be able to figure all this out either. So sometimes you need to start with, writing down a sample of what's going to go in and how you might calculate that and what results you should get. Maybe you need to start there before putting your algorithm in. That kind of depends on the person. Okay, so there's a whole problem solved from beginning to end that includes user input, calculations, output, formatting output, and using a constant.